North Carolina's governor has just declared a state of emergency as Hurricane Erin's 130 miles per hour winds barrel toward the coast, and officials are panicking that this storm could topple the entire real estate market overnight. Thousands have been ordered to evacuate the Outer Banks, but there's something more at stake than flooded homes. Virginia's housing market is already teetering, with listings staying up 32% longer and insurance costs skyrocketing to $2,425 per year. If Erin lands a direct hit, property values could collapse and insurance rates could spike so high that buying, or even keeping, a home becomes impossible. What exactly are state leaders so afraid of, and how close are we to financial disaster? Hurricane Erin's wind field stretches wider than the state of North Carolina itself, with maximum sustained winds clocking 130 miles per hour. The storm's core packs enough force to rip shingles, topple power lines, and send debris flying for blocks. But it's the reach of those winds that has officials on edge. Hurricane-force gusts now extend 80 miles from the center, and tropical storm-force winds push out 230 miles, enough to blanket the entire Outer Banks, much of the tidewater, and deep into Virginia's coastal plain. Forecasters warn that Erin's approach will drive a wall of water toward the shore. Surge projections show 15 to 20-foot waves building offshore, with the potential for 4 feet of water above ground level in low-lying neighborhoods from Duck to Cape Lookout. Inlets and sounds, already swollen by days of onshore wind, threaten to spill into streets and crawl spaces. For homes perched just a few feet above sea level, it's a race between sandbags and rising tide. The relentless churn of Erin's outer bands is already pushing salt spray far inland. Rainfall totals could top 8 inches in some spots, overwhelming storm drains and turning backyards into ponds. On the beachfront, dunes designed to hold back the Atlantic are at risk of collapse. The National Hurricane Center calls the surf life-threatening, with 20-foot breakers expected to crash over Highway 12, the only road connecting Hatteras and Ocracoke to the mainland. In the hours before landfall, the wind howls through empty streets. Emergency managers brace for reports of structural damage, roofs peeled away, siding torn off, windows shattered by flying debris. Boats moored in marinas along Albemarle and Pamlico Sound strain against their lines, while waterfront homes face the threat of both wind and water. The sheer size of Erin's wind field means even properties miles from the coastline are at risk of downed trees and extended power outages. With every new forecast, the potential for catastrophic flooding grows. Surge maps show entire neighborhoods at risk of inundation, especially in areas where dunes have already been breached by earlier storms. The combination of high tide and onshore wind could push saltwater deep into neighborhoods that have never flooded before. For many, the question is no longer if damage will occur, but how much can be saved before the worst of Erin's power arrives. Governor Josh Stein's voice carried across the state as he declared a state of emergency for all 100 North Carolina counties. By midday, his office released a statement warning that Hurricane Erin posed an extraordinary threat to life and property, urging residents to finalize evacuation plans and secure their homes. The order triggered a chain reaction. Emergency management teams activated, National Guard units mobilized, and local officials prepared to enforce mandatory evacuations on Hatteras and Ocracoke Islands. Ferry schedules were overhauled, with outbound trips prioritized and inbound access cut off for everyone but essential personnel. At the State Emergency Operations Center in Raleigh, Stein sat for back-to-back briefings with meteorologists and insurance regulators. His tone grew sharper with each new surge projection. "If you are on the barrier islands, you need to leave now," he told reporters. The urgency was unmistakable. This was not just about public safety, but about the economic backbone of the region. Thousands of vacation rentals, second homes, and beachfront properties hung in the balance. The Outer Banks, a linchpin of North Carolina's $5.5 billion coastal real estate market, faced a direct hit. Behind closed doors, Stein pressed for contingency plans from the state's Department of Insurance. With insurers already signaling temporary moratoriums on new policies, the governor demanded daily updates on claims readiness and coverage gaps. "We cannot afford another insurance crisis," he told his advisors, referencing the sharp premium hikes and insurer exits that followed recent hurricane seasons. Meanwhile, real estate agents across Dare and Hyde counties fielded panicked calls from homeowners and buyers. Pending sales stalled overnight, with lenders unwilling to close on properties in the storm's projected path. Stein's public appearances grew more frequent as Erin's wind field expanded. He stood at the podium flanked by emergency managers warning, "The time to act is now. Protect your family. Protect your property." Evacuation orders for the Outer Banks became mandatory by 6 p.m. with law enforcement tasked to sweep neighborhoods and ensure compliance. Highway 12, the only route off Hatteras, saw a steady line of vehicles as residents and vacationers fled west. For Stein, the political risk was clear. A misstep could mean not only loss of life but a cascade of economic fallout, plummeting property values, insurance turmoil, and a shaken investor base. With each new advisory from the National Hurricane Center, the governor's office tightened its grip, issuing fresh warnings and pushing for expanded federal disaster declarations. The message from Raleigh was unambiguous. North Carolina's leadership would not be caught flat-footed as Hurricane Erin threatened to redraw the map of the state's most valuable real estate. Virginia beach sellers watched their listings linger 32% longer this summer than last, with the average home now sitting on the market for more than 40 days. That's a sharp reversal from the fast-paced sales of 2022 and 2023, when coastal homes often sold in under 3 weeks. For agents and investors, the slowdown signals a market already on edge, well before Hurricane Erin's first winds reach shore. MLS data confirms the trend. Pending sales in flood-prone zip codes dropped by double digits in July, and open houses that once drew crowds now see only a trickle of buyers. Insurance costs are compounding the problem. The average annual premium in Virginia Beach has climbed to $2,425, more than double the state average of $1,119. Buyers who once stretched to afford a mortgage now face an added $200 a month just for basic coverage. For oceanfront properties, premiums can top $7,000, with some policies requiring hurricane deductibles as high as 5% of the insured value. Lenders are tightening standards, demanding proof of flood insurance, and sometimes pausing closings when a named storm enters the Atlantic. The financial pressure isn't limited to buyers. Investors holding short-term rentals along Sandbridge and Croatan are seeing vacancy rates rise as vacationers cancel bookings and insurance carriers announce temporary moratoriums on new policies. Each day a property sits empty or unsold chips away at projected returns. The broader market feels it too. Local banks report higher rates of delayed closings and more requests for mortgage extensions as uncertainty over storm risk grows. Behind the numbers is a market at a tipping point. Nearly every transaction now hinges on insurance availability, with some deals collapsing when coverage can't be secured. As Erin approaches, the risk isn't just physical damage, it's the potential for a prolonged freeze in sales, leaving both homeowners and investors exposed to falling values and rising costs. The region's real estate engine, once driven by steady demand and easy financing, now sputters under the weight of compounding risks. Virginia's flood disclosure laws leave buyers exposed in ways few realize. Unlike North Carolina and South Carolina, which both earned top marks from the Natural Resources Defense Council for transparency, Virginia received an F, the lowest possible grade. Sellers here are not required to reveal whether a home has ever flooded, sits in a floodplain, or even if it's been denied insurance due to risk. A buyer can close on a house just blocks from Back Bay or the Elizabeth River without ever being told about past water damage or repeated claims. The law places the burden on the buyer to investigate, But with no central database and little cooperation from sellers, most never learn the true risk until after the first major storm. This lack of transparency has real financial consequences. In 2023, the Virginia Rate Bureau filed for a 99.4% increase in insurance rates for beach counties, Brunswick, Carteret, New Hanover, and others, citing the hidden costs of repetitive flood losses and climate-driven hazards. While the final settlement came in lower, the signal was clear. Underreported flood histories are driving up premiums for everyone. Buyers who skip due diligence risk inheriting properties with a history of water damage, denied claims, or even uninsurable status. Lenders are tightening standards, but enforcement is inconsistent, leaving gaps that only become visible when disaster strikes. For prospective homeowners, the risk isn't just the storm outside, but the paperwork inside. A clean disclosure form in Virginia means little. It's legal for sellers to check no knowledge, even after a major flood. Out-of-state buyers, drawn by lower prices or a quick closing, often discover too late that their new home has a history of mold, foundation repairs, or insurance denials. As climate change accelerates the frequency and severity of storms like Erin, the lack of reliable information leaves buyers gambling with their financial future. The state's policy gap turns every transaction into a risk, one that grows with each passing hurricane season. When Hurricane Katrina swept through New Orleans in August 2005, the city's housing market faced a crisis unlike anything in modern American history. Floodwaters damaged or destroyed more than 134,000 homes in Orleans Parish alone, with 107,000 units suffering flood damage, many beyond repair. Across the Gulf Coast, the total number of homes rendered uninhabitable reached nearly 300,000. Yet in the months that followed, the price of surviving homes didn't collapse. Instead, a severe shortage of habitable properties sent prices surging. In neighborhoods spared the worst of the flooding, home values jumped as much as 40% in the year after the storm, driven by families desperate to stay in the city and by out-of-town workers pouring in for the massive rebuilding effort. Rental markets tightened even faster, with fair market rents in New Orleans climbing to record highs. For buyers with cash or insurance payouts, the scramble for undamaged homes pushed competition and prices to levels few could have imagined just weeks before. Katrina's destruction didn't just erase inventory, it rewrote the rules of supply and demand, turning scarcity into a powerful force that reshaped the city's real estate market for years to come. In the months after Hurricane Sandy struck the Northeast, buyers in places hundreds of miles away began to see risk in a new light. In Miami-Dade County, homes in high flood risk zones lost their price premium almost overnight. Where waterfront properties once sold for 4 to 6% more than similar inland homes, Sandy's devastation erased that advantage. For a brief window, buyers demanded a 4% discount on any house flagged as high risk for flooding, even though Miami hadn't seen a drop of rain from that storm. Google searches for flood risk spiked along the Florida coast, as news coverage of New York's flooded neighborhoods made the threat feel suddenly real. The same shift played out in moderate risk zones up and down the East Coast. In areas mapped as floodplains but spared direct damage, sale prices fell by 4 to 5% compared to similar homes on higher ground. Market studies show that even without a single broken window, just being labeled as at risk was enough to drag down values for years. In Miami, the effect faded after about 3 months, but in the Northeast, price discounts for floodplain homes lingered far longer. The lesson for buyers was clear. Storms don't have to make landfall to leave a mark on local real estate. Perception alone can knock thousands off a listing price, changing what buyers are willing to pay and what sellers can expect long after the skies clear. Hurricane Andrew's landfall in August 1992 did more than flatten neighborhoods. It shattered the foundation of Florida's property insurance market. 8 insurance companies, including Florida Fire, Regency, and Nova Southern, collapsed under the weight of $15.5 billion in insured losses. Most were small, Florida-based carriers, heavily concentrated in South Florida, and had never faced losses on this scale. Their failure left tens of thousands of homeowners stranded, claims unpaid, and the state's insurance safety net, the Florida Insurance Guarantee Association, scrambling to pick up the pieces. The crisis forced lawmakers into a special session that December, where they introduced a new, untested tool, the hurricane deductible. Instead of a flat $250, policyholders now faced paying 2 to 5% of their home's value before insurance kicked in. An immediate and permanent shift in how catastrophic risk was shared. Andrew's aftermath didn't just bankrupt insurers, it rewrote the rules, pushing risk back onto property owners and setting the stage for the modern hurricane deductible system that now defines coastal insurance from Miami to Virginia Beach. Mortgage lenders require proof of insurance on every home they finance. When insurers pull back or freeze new policies, the entire lending pipeline grinds to a halt. During an active hurricane threat, most carriers stop issuing new coverage, leaving buyers unable to close. For those with pending contracts, a single missing binder can delay a sale for weeks. Banks refuse to fund loans if coverage isn't locked in, regardless of how close the deal is to closing. G-Rate's latest risk models flag the region as high volatility, prompting automated underwriting systems to pause approvals until storm risk drops. That means buyers with rate locks see them expire, sellers watch deals collapse, and agents scramble to salvage transactions. Without insurance, mortgage approvals stall. Without mortgages, sales freeze. The dominoes fall fast, first on the coast, then inland, as risk models widen their caution zones. The entire market becomes paralyzed, not by physical damage, but by the absence of a single sheet of paper, proof of insurance. Governor Josh Stein's decision-making entered a pressure cooker as Hurricane Erin's threat became undeniable. The weight of 33 million homes exposed to hurricane winds, representing $11.7 trillion in reconstruction value nationwide, hung over every emergency briefing. Stein's advisors presented new projections by the hour, each more dire than the last. The limits of state authority became painfully clear. North Carolina's disaster funds could cover only a fraction of what a direct hit would cost. Federal aid, while substantial, never arrives fast enough to fill the gaps in lost income, unpaid insurance claims, or depreciated property values. The governor's calls with Washington grew more urgent, pushing for preemptive disaster declarations to unlock quicker FEMA support. Yet even with federal resources on standby, the scale of potential loss dwarfed anything in recent memory. Insurance regulators warned that another round of mass payouts could force more carriers out of the state. Following the exits that plagued Florida after Hurricane Andrew, the specter of empty neighborhoods, stalled rebuilding, and a hollowed-out coastal economy forced Stein to weigh every word at the podium. Each statement risked spooking buyers, lenders, or insurers further, yet silence wasn't an option. Behind the scenes, Stein's team drafted contingency plans for mass housing shortfalls, temporary shelters, and emergency mortgage assistance. But the governor understood the core dilemma. No policy could fully shield the real estate market from the raw force of nature. The best he could do was manage the panic, keep lines of communication open, and hope that Erin's path would spare the state from the kind of irreversible market shock that once took years to unwind in New Orleans and Miami. In those tense hours, leadership meant confronting the limits of control with billions in property and the future of entire communities hanging in the balance. Hurricane Erin arrived as a Category 4 storm with 130-mile-per-hour winds, prompting Governor Josh Stein to declare a state of emergency and order evacuations across North Carolina's Outer Banks. As documented, Home insurance premiums in Virginia Beach have now soared to $2,425, double the state average, while homes linger unsold for 32% longer than the year before. Historical evidence from Katrina, Sandy, and Andrew shows that storms often trigger both sudden price drops and long-term insurance crises, with more than 33 million U.S. homes and $11.7 trillion exposed to hurricane risk today. However, the full impact of Erin on property values and insurance stability remains uncertain, pending future damage reports and rate filings. What's clear now is that the link between insurability and the housing market has never been more fragile. As authorities and homeowners navigate the aftermath, the data confirms: when storms grow stronger and insurance grows scarcer, the entire real estate foundation stands at risk.